What's going on, everyone? It's Ben from YGO from Zero, back with another Retro Yu-Gi-Oh video, and back with another video exploring Dad Return format, the format held in April 2008 at SJC Minneapolis of that year, with a card pool going up to around Phantom Darkness. So Phantom Darkness changed the game forever. You know, people point to Synchros as the point where the game really changes, forever and becomes a lot more focused on special summoning and things like that. But I think Dad Return format actually does take that cake because there's just a lot of different decks running around that can do some pretty crazy things. One of the decks that could have potentially done some crazy things if it wasn't gatekept by the rest of the meta is Gigaplant. Now, Gigaplant and Lonefire Blossom both came out in Phantom Darkness. Lonefire Blossom actually a TCG exclusive and kind of a cracked one. You know, there aren't too many good plants around at this time period. But with Gigaplant, you can actually make an interesting sort of deck. So you go Lonefire into Gigaplant, and then you use Gigaplant to bring back other things like Lonefire that you attributed off. And then you can bring out another Gigaplant from deck. If you're playing Blazewing Butterfly, which this deck is, then you can potentially bring this back as well, and then bring back another Gigaplant that's engraved or something like that. A lot of interesting stuff that you can do with this deck. And I think it's just like not quite there yet in terms of power level. You know, it doesn't have a lot of the tools that make it a good deck in Edison format. Like there's no, supervise or things like that. So it's just a deck that doesn't quite have all the tools it needs yet, but we'll still try and make it work, see if it can actually do something. So just going through the card by card here, and going through what the main combos are, we got the triple Lonefire Blossom and the triple Gigaplant, as I mentioned. We got Sangan to search out the Lonefire Blossoms, or potentially to search out a Blazewing if you really need it, but generally you're searching out the Lonefire to go into just a big guy, right? And that's oftentimes what Gigaplant is. You just bring it out at 2400. Now, the deck does have ways to get into Super Alloy Beast Raptinus, which is a fusion monster that basically turns on the Gemini effects of all Gemini monsters on field. We're playing triple Dragon Mirror to go into this thing, because the thing is a dragon. We're also playing Future Fusion to bring it out, although generally you're using Future Fusion just to set up your graveyard. Generally you go Future Fusion, you can send like a Blazewing and a Gigaplant, and then if you're playing something like Swing of Memories, which we are, you Swing of Memories back to Blazewing, normal summon it, then tribute it off with its effect to bring back the Gigaplant. So that's generally the main combo, the bread and butter combo of this deck, but it does take a lot of pieces to go right. And then even then, it doesn't necessarily have the best payoff overall compared to something like a Dad Return deck, which is playing triple Dark Arm Dragon and can just blow you out immediately. But we'll still try and play through that anyways. To counter those sorts of decks, we've got Kaiku the Ghost Destroyer. This is kind of a neat card in this metagame. A lot of different things it can do. It also stops DD Crows, which we are playing 3 of because it's an anti-meta pick against a lot of other decks in the format. But the Kaikus prevent our opponent from DD Crowing us. Now, we do have some safeguards against DD Crow. For instance, Gigaplant has the effect that does not target. So, if you have 2 Lonefires in grave, generally you want to set that up. So you go summon Lonefire Tribute for another Lonefire Tribute for a Gigaplant. So that way, just in case they've got a DD Crow, you can still bring out something off Gigaplant because, again, this effect does not target. So, we do have the safeguards, as I mentioned, but it is still rough if you get crowed. So Kaiku does stop that. And also, the safeguards don't really work if you activate Swing of Memories or something, and that gets crowed. So the Kaiku is very important there for stopping those crow plays. And we got triple Sidra as well. This can be sent off Future Fusion too, so it's another nice backup there. And also just allows us to get aggressive, allows us to potentially set up a monster to tribute for a Gigaplant as well. So that's pretty nice there too. For the spells, we got triple Allure of Darkness to run deeper in our deck. We don't have the most dark targets, only the Sangan, triple Crow, and Kaiku, but we do want the draw power because this deck is a full-on combo deck, and so you do want to be comboing off if you can. We got BrainCon to take control of our opponent's things, potentially treat for a Gigaplant. We've got Card Destruction to pitch our hand and then draw some more. This can also be good at just messing up your opponent's dark count. So sometimes, like if it's the first turn, you do kind of want to blind Card Destruction if you don't have much, and you just want to mess up your opponent's stuff. We had Dim Fuse because Dragon Mirror does banish, so, if we do some Dragon Mirror plays and then go for Dim Fuse, that can, sort of put us over the top of some other decks, but it is kind of a rare case that it comes up. We got Future Fusion, as I mentioned. We've got the True Nade as well to spin back our opponent's spell traps, along with Heavy and MST. This deck can be kind of an OTK deck, because you just bring out a bunch of big guys, attack in, so we do want the True Nade, Heavy, MST to actually clear the way for our monsters. We got Reborn and Premat to bring back more stuff. Swing of Memories, as I mentioned. We got Mirror Force, TT, and Dust Shoot to close out the lineup here. We are kind of tugged on deck space at the end when building this deck, but I do think these cards are good to include because they do protect you from your opponent's stuff. For the side deck, we've got Future Samurai. It's an interesting Gemini monster that I wanted to sort of experiment having with here. Like, it can potentially clear up some annoying threats because basically this is a Gemini monster that lets you banish a monster from your graveyard, trigger one face-up monster on the field and destroy that target. It also does fuel our Dim Fuses, so that's kind of nice as well. It's more just an interesting card that, I was potentially going to experiment bringing in at different points. We got triple Necro Garnet for if we're up against like OTK decks and we want to potentially bring it in instead of the DD Crows. If we're up against a deck that DD Crow isn't really that effective against, these can also be good to bring in and potentially get set up in grave, prevent OTKs. We got a Grand Mole for decks that suffer against Grand Mole. We got triple Symbols of Duty. This is kind of an interesting card that I was considering a bit. Basically, you send a normal monster that you control on field, so basically the Blazewings or the Gigaplants, and then you get to spell summon a monster in either player's graveyard, so that can be like cool to sort of steal your opponent's disc commanders or things like that. It's kind of a neat effect, but I think it honestly is not worth playing. I just have it here on the side to again experiment with, because this deck is still like very much in the building phase, I think. Like this is a workable first build, but I think if you want to play this in the future, you gotta, optimize it further. Triple Dust Tornado for more back row heavy decks. We got a Mind Crush here for decks that are searching. Also, if you're going first, this is good to bring in, I think. We got triple Soul Resurrection here to bring back our normal monsters as well. So just another way to bring that back. But it is a bit slower, so you generally don't want to bring this in going second. But I think if you're going first and you're up against a deck that is not playing too many DD Crows, this could be good to bring in. But then again, if you're up against another deck, they're probably going to side DD Crows against you anyways, so it's a bit iffy there. But anyways, for the Fusion deck, we got the Chimeritic Overdragon, Cyber Dragon, Cyber Twin Dragon, just for random, future Fusion plays that we might go into. And then we got the Super Alloy Beast Rapidness. And I don't think there's any other Fusion monster that can really come up with this deck layout here. If there are any other that, should fill that 3 remaining slots left here on DB, then let me know. But anyways, the Fusion deck at this point is unlimited because the Synchro rule is not coming around yet. So you can just play however many Fusion monsters you want here, but these are the only ones that really matter. But with that being said, let's dive into a game and see how this deck actually plays. So we got a game here against our Ratos of frequent guests on the channel. Always a pleasure to have them on. We're going to dive into the game, so I guess I have the sounds on here, so let's mute that tab there. Those people want the sound effects. Let me know down in the comments below if you prefer the sound effects or not. I generally have them off for my commentary, but, if you like them, then I can definitely make more videos with them in the future. But anyway, their opponent's going to start with an Upstart Goblin here. So they're going to draw a card, we gain 1,000, and they're going to go for a Stratos here, searching out a hero from deck. So they're going to search out the Dasher. And then they're going to activate Allure, draw 2, banish that Dasher that we know about. And then they're going to go for another Allure, draw 2, banish a Demock there. That's a bit scary if they've got like a Dim Fuse or something like that. And they're going to set 3, pass back to us. So I feel like one of those probably return, but we'll have to see exactly what they do here. In standby, they're going to go for a Trap Dust. You get a peek at our hand here, spin back the side row, which can deal with the Stratos, makes sense. And they're going to go for Mind Crush, hit that Allure. So I think that makes sense as well. They could have potentially hit the Kaiku, but I think it's fine because we could potentially just go for a blind Allure here, set up the Gigaplant and Grave with Allure, and then swing Memories it back to attack over and do stuff with that. So I do think it makes sense to hit the Allure because it just turns on our combo potential. But it was an option that they had to potentially hit the Kaiku as well. I think this does make sense for them, though. They're going to, or we're going to think about this, that is, and we're going to bring out a Kaiku the Ghost Destroyer here. The way I see this is that it kind of does, if we want to, we can attack into the Stratos. That's something we can do here, but I more view this as insurance for them, potentially doing a big play here. If they've got return, they've got return no matter what, so they can just return back their Demock and their Dasher and just go crazy. But if they don't have return or something like that, then if they want to go for a dad play here or set up some crazy stuff, Kaiku makes it a bit harder for them to do that. So I figure I'll just leave Kaiku on field. They have to, next turn, go into battle to attack into it. And I feel like that's just going to crash the Stratos anyways, so it ultimately will probably turn out to be the same sort of thing. And this way, if they've got a Premat or Reborn, they don't get to revive the Stratos, get more searches, do all that stuff. So I'm just actually going to leave the Kaiku here and pass back to them. They know our back row, so they know it's not real, so no point in setting that. I fear I can leave it at this. They're going to set 2, pass back to us. We draw Allure. They've got Crush Card, though, so they're going to tribute that Disc Commander there, and they're going to get rid of the Kaiku and the Gigaplant, and that is very unfortunate for us. It's a bit of a tricky one. If we go for Allure, everything is seen under Crush Card, so, we don't necessarily want to blind Allure here. And also, we don't necessarily want to go for Swing of Memories on the Gigaplant right now, because, then the Gigaplant just dies in end phase, even if we normal summon it. So we want to potentially wait for when we have more setup here, and we can actually do stuff with that. So they're going to go for a Rhoda here for a DD Warrior Lady, and things are going from bad to worse now because now they got a bit more of a clock on us here. They're attacking for 15 and 18, and that is all going to go through there. And then they're just going to pass back to us. We draw into a Blazewing Butterfly, which does unfortunately hit the Crush Card requirement there. But now we do have 2 Geminis engraved, so we can go for a Dragon's Mirror, or we can go for a Swing of Memories here. There's a bit of... It's a bit interesting. So, if they've got Crow in hand, right, going for Dragon's Mirror first makes more sense, because if they Crow to stop that, then we can Swing of Memories back something and get things going. But I actually don't think that's that valuable to us, because then again, it's the same problem we had last turn where Swing of Memories on the Gigaplant is not really that impactful, and they're probably going to banish the Gigaplant anyways. We just have the Blazewing Butterfly there for the Swing Memories. So I actually think the better play to do here is to go for the Swing of Memories now, try and hit the Butterfly to then normal summon the Butterfly, bring back Gigaplant. And if this fails, then we still have Gigaplant in Grave, and also, we can set up our Dragon's Mirror later. But if it succeeds, then we're in a pretty good spot. So, unfortunately, they do have the Crow, so they're going to banish that Butterfly there. I guess they could have potentially banished the Gigaplant. I should have asked them, but if they banish the Gigaplant, then there is the option that we go, set Dragon's Mirror, activate Allure, blind Allure, hope to hit some Geminis that get pitched, and then we bring Maximum with Butterfly anyways. So I think this probably is the safer option, especially given that they know we've got Dragon's Mirror and Allure in hand. So, yeah, I think this does make sense. We're going to hold the Alert here. We're not at risk of dying just yet, I believe, unless they've got like a Dim Fuse or Return. And if they've got those, they probably win either way. So I don't really feel like it's worth, going for the Alert just yet until we're actually at risk of like dying. We really need to go for the Blind Alert. So they're going to attack in for 33. Set one, pass back to us. We draw into a Brain Con, which is a bit interesting here. We can Brain Con the DD Warrior Lady and attack into the Stratos. That is indeed what we're going to do here. So we're going to do that, attack in. And that does indeed go through, so we'll get to banish both of these. Again, if they've got Dim Fuse or Return, we're losing either way. So I figure there's not really much point to, worrying about setting up their banish pile, because they've already got about as good a setup in the banish pile as they could hope for. So I feel like this is fine. And then main two, we're actually going to go for the Blind Alert here. It's still awkward because we are under Crush Card, so everything drawn off Alert will get hit here. But I wanted to know what they had going for them in, main one or in battle. Potentially if they had a way to stop the DD Whirly, then we could go for Allure. But, we could have probably gone for this beforehand, but we're going to banish the Crow, and we have this Dragon's Mirror here. So, that's not really going to help us here. We only have one Gemini in Grave, so, but it looks like they don't really have much to do here. So we draw into Kaiku, which is pretty good. We can summon out that Kaiku, and they're going to think about this and ultimately go for a TT on that. I think that does make sense, because, we could potentially mess up their Dark Count a bit, and they clearly don't have a Dim Fuse or Return, or else they'd go for that, but they've got Reborn there, so they're going to Reborn on Kaiku. It wouldn't matter either way because we had another Kaiku and a Gigaplant in Grave. But yeah, so we would have lost here either way. It's just quite unfortunate because that will indeed be the end of game one. Game two, we're going to go into, I think, with another Mind Crush, because I think Mind Crush is pretty good going first. But we don't really change up too much because the deck is kind of teched out to face Dad Return in game one. But what we're going to do here, it's a bit of an interesting play. I did think a fair bit about this and decide, okay, is this worth doing? Is it not worth doing? But I actually think it is probably worth doing because with Kaiku, they can't really easily banish things from their grave to change their Dark Count. So I actually do think it is good just to blind card destruction here, pitching a Blazewing Butterfly and a Cyber Dragon, pitching their entire hand, and then having Kaiku up to potentially prevent them from being able to do much here. We draw into DD Crow and Dragon's Mirror as well, so this is actually a pretty formidable board state. They've lost both the revival cards, so we could potentially leave it at this, but I am a bit worried about something like a Heavy Storm, for instance, so what I will decide to do here is go for a Reborn on their Jinzo, just to bring that back, shut off any traps they might have, and leave it at this. And I feel like this is a pretty, annoying board for my opponent to face down. Not unbeatable by any means, but it's definitely pretty annoying for them. They're going to go for a D-draw here, pitching a Dasher. They only have two Darks in Grave right now, but if they ever do get a third, we can potentially go for the Crow and prevent that from coming down. They're going to go for an Alert here as well, banish a Crow, and then they're going to think about this a bit. And ultimately, they're going to go for a Heavy to hit our True Nate, so that's fine. We're okay trading that. But then they go for Brain Con on the Jinzo, which is going to be a bit annoying for us, especially when they go for a Reaper as well. So they're able to attack over this Kaiku here, and then they're going to attack him with Reaper. Now, we could potentially, hold the Crow here, have two cards in hand, then guaranteed have one card in our hand next turn. But that doesn't really help us because we don't have another, Gemini in rotation here. So if we, manage to keep the Dragon's Mirror, what are we doing with that next turn? Not really anything. So I guess there is a world in which we tribute over the Jinzo if we draw Gigaplant and then Dragon's Mirror, or if we draw a Blazewing, we summon out the Blazewing, go for Dragon's Mirror, and then we have that. But is that really worth it? I don't quite know if it is. So I think it actually is more worth it just to go for a Crow here, banish something they could potentially use for later if they manage to clear the Kaiku, which they did. So I think it is just good to actually go for that, banish the Mally, just in case they've got weird things with the Mally there, and then they're going to set one, pass back to us. We draw into Allure, which we don't necessarily want to use here to blind Allure, especially since we've already gone through a DD Crow, which is one of our few dark targets in the deck, along with the Kaiku. And we're just going to set the alert pass back to them. The reason I said it is because if they manage to clear the Jinzo somehow and then attack him with Reaper, then we lose that card in hand. So I don't necessarily want to run into that. We're going to switch the Reaper to defense, set 1, pass back to us, and we draw Swing of Memories, which is not really the best here. I mean, it's good for later, I guess, if we, get into a, Gigaplant or something like that. We can Swing Memories back to Blazewing, tribute over that for the Gigaplant. But right now it's kind of awkward. So they've got 2 monsters on field. I could just let this be and pass back to them. I think the only time where that really comes up is if they've got a Sangan set. That is probably the better play. I guess they could have sided in Legendary Jujitsu Master or something like that. People are siding that for things like Gladiator Beast or decks that suffer against that. But I'm not sure you necessarily bring that in against this deck. So I don't really feel like that's much of a worry to really, put much heat in. So yeah, I just decide, okay, I want to play around them having DMOC in hand, because that would actually kill us here. They tribute out a DMOC and then attack over Jinzo. If it is Sangan, they do get a search, but, they don't quite have the tools right now to deal with Jinzo. That search could get them into the tools to deal with Jinzo, but I don't think they're playing things like Newdoria or things like that, that can clear the Jinzo on their own. So I feel like it is okay if it is a Sangan to attack into it. If it's Legendary Jujutsu Master, again, I don't necessarily anticipate them bringing that in, but if it is, we get punished for it, and it is what it is. But it looks like it is indeed the Sangan. So they're going to search out a Disc Commander, which is a bit annoying here because that does turn on a D-draw if they've got it. But their Reborn and their Premat are both engrave. So, it's not the worst thing in the world for us. And I doubt they're playing Fearmonger because most dad return decks are not playing that anymore. But they're going to go for a D-draw, pitching the Disc Commander, drawing 2 here. That does get 3 Darks engrave, which is annoying for us. That is also another consideration here. But if they had DMOC, they would have been able to get 3 Darks engrave either way. So it is kind of rough, but it is what it is. And they have to have the dad, and unfortunately they do have the dad here, so they're going to pop our board. There's an argument that, maybe we should have held these in hand, but I feel like the counter argument is that, if we held them in hand, they're just going to switch the Reaper to attack after popping our board and then get in with that. So, I don't know if it necessarily helps us here either way, if we held them versus setting them. But they're going to attack over the Jinzo, get rid of that, get another Dark Engrave, set 1, pass back to us. We draw Fufu, which is not really good enough right now. We can at least use it to deck in here, so we're going to reveal Raptinus. And since we have the Blazewing engrave already, we don't really need to set that up, so we can just send 2 Gigaplants, which will both be bricks on the top of the deck. At least with Blazewing, we can set it. But, it's not looking good for us here. We have basically no resources. Our opponent has a ton of resources. And they're going to pop that Fufu. Go for Crush Card as well, just to, prevent us from getting anything else really good. And then they're going to go for a turn on top of that. So this will indeed be enough damage to kill us here. And that's just going to be the end of the game. And that's kind of what these dad return decks do. They can just get so much advantage, so much damage out. And if you're playing a very fragile combo deck like the Gigaplant is, that also does not really have as good of an end board as dad return, it is kind of rough, and unfortunately we can't quite get it there. Despite the fact that this deck will potentially get tools later that will make it pretty decent in the formats that it will have those tools in. Right now, just it's not here. So still fun to experiment with, and I'm glad, I sort of showed this off on the channel. I think it's fun. But that will be it for Dad Return. This was the last deck that I really want to show off for it, and that will be diving into Gladiator format, which will also be the format of the monthly tournament on the YGO from Zero Discord server, linked in the description down below. If you want to play games in this format or any other format that I featured on the channel, including Gladiator format, then head on over there, and it's a lot of fun. It's a great server, and you can get a bunch of games in it. So definitely head on over there if you're interested in that. If you like what I do here and want to see more of this, then definitely, like, comment, subscribe, grow the channel even more, and grow the community even more. So hopefully we get more people playing in these formats, that enjoy them, right? Dad Return is not necessarily a format that I think everyone will enjoy, but there are people out there who do. So it's nice to sort of unite those people with a format that they can enjoy. If you want to support me directly, I also have a Patreon linked in the description down below. If you join the Patreon, you'll get shouted out in these videos. So big shout outs to Rincewind, Pork Turpkin, Red Knocker, Tyler Compton, GeoMyFS, Dump Truck, Scout Zero, and Damon Hess. It means a lot that y'all support me this way and encourage me to make more videos like this one in the future. But that's going to do it for this video and for Dad Return. I hope that you all enjoyed as always. And until next time, I've been Ben from YGO from Zero. I'm signing off. Peace.